Hello and welcome to Organizational Leadership 3000, Reflective Seminar 1, The Self as Learner. During this course you're going to be discovering a number of different theories that allow for reflective learning. In other words, what you're going to be doing is looking back at past experiences that you've had which illustrate how you learn, which illustrate the kinds of assumptions or belief systems that affect how you learn. So what this course really is a way of having a theoretical structure about reflective learning that you can then relate to practical experiences that you've actually had in your life. Next up, one of the things that we want to do to let you know to plan ahead. In Learning Module 1, we always announce that during Learning Module 4, about the 5th week of the class, you're going to have a film example that you're going to write about in the discussion tool of our class. So you may want to prepare ahead of time how you will pick which film and how you are going to plan on seeing that particular film. During Organizational Leadership 3000, you have 4 different film choices. You could watch Local Hero, which is available through Netflix for streaming or rental and Amazon for purchase. You could watch Nobody's Fool, which is a different film starring Paul Newman, and that's available through Netflix and Amazon. There's also the choice of How to Make an American Quilt, which is a very interesting film about a girl played by Winona Ryder who is planning on getting married, and that's available through Netflix and Amazon. You can also decide to watch Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood, which is kind of a fantastic movie about a daughter and her relationship to her mom and her mom's friends. So when you're looking for your choice of film, plan on which one of these you would like to watch and write about for the Learning Module 4 material of our class. Next up, in Organizational Leadership 3000, we have a certain set of learning outcomes that we want you to focus on. Learning outcomes are a way that professors explain what they're doing during a particular course, and the learning outcomes for the Organizational Leadership classes are all slightly different. In Organizational Leadership 3000, you're focusing on yourself as a learner, so it's kind of the first step of a reflective process. For that reason, the learning outcomes of the course involve things like describing past experiences that you've had that involve learning, being able to analyze those past events and your personal feelings about those events, summarizing the actions and feelings that are part of your past learning process. You'll also have to show that you can record those events in good written work, and you want to make sure that you can discuss those situations using the conceptual frameworks for reflection. So what that means when we say discuss them using the frameworks, that's saying that you have to make sure that each discussion posting that you do, each assignment tool that you do, makes reference back to the theoretical structures within the learning modules of the course. So there's going to be theories that you're going to learn about that are associated with particular education scholars, and you want to make sure that you are saying in your written work, okay, here I'm taking inspiration from Kolb, or here I'm taking inspiration from Courthagen and Vesalius. There are certain people during the course who you're going to make sure that you're referring back to. Next up, let me do a little bit of explaining about the different tools that you use during an online course like this one. One of the things that you may end up having your first experience with as an organizational leadership student is the way that an online course is structured and the way that BlazeView, which is our way of looking at the course, actually is set up with different tools. You're probably accessing the course through GOML, which stands for Georgia on My Line. When you log into the course for the first time, and then you click on Organizational Leadership 3000, you're going to notice that there's a menu of different shapes along the left side of each page of the class. Those different shapes represent what we call tools. Tools are ways that you turn in work. And in these 1 credit hour organizational leadership courses, what you're doing is turning in work probably in a different tool each week. So when you're looking for the discussion tool, look for the blue thumbtack shape that you see on this slide underneath Discussion Tool Introduction Discussion. The assessment tool should look like a yellow piece of paper with a little watch next to it. Assessment tool would be another way of describing a quiz or an exam, something that you end up having to take, and usually it's in a timed format. That's why they have a little watch on its icon, on its shape. Next up, the assignment tool. The assignment tool is a way that you turn in attached Word documents, attached papers. During the first week of the course, you're going to be turning in a sample introduction assignment tool, which can just be one line where you say that, this is your name and this is you, and now you're in the course. Next up, in future weeks of the class, you will end up having to do a full paper within the assignment tool. So when you're looking for the assignment tool shape or icon on the left side of the class, it should look like a yellow piece of paper with a little gray ruler on one corner of the piece of paper. The next tool that we're looking at is the Mail tool. The Mail tool looks like a little yellow envelope with the top of the envelope open. That's a way of doing email within the class. When you're doing an online class through GOML, usually we expect you to do your emailing to the professor using that Mail tool. It's usually better to try and contact within the class, that way there's a record of all the communication. So think of that little yellow envelope on the left side of the class as being the way that you do email with your professor inside of the class. The next tool that you're looking at on this slide is the Calendar tool. It should look like a square, old-fashioned wall calendar, and then there's one day that's kind of popping out. It looks like it might be a Thursday on this calendar. That's the Calendar tool where the professor is going to post when each weekly assignment begins and ends. So in other words, you have learning modules that you're going to be going through during the course, and then the course operates in a system of weeks as well. So for particular activities in week 1 and week 2, that should be available to you if you click on that Calendar tool. Next up, when you're looking at the idea of the reflective seminars and the capstone in organizational leadership starts out with 3 one-credit-hour reflective seminars. So you're going to be thinking first about Organizational Leadership 3000, our class, where you're studying yourself in terms of your emotions, feelings, ideas, and assumptions that affect your learning process. As you continue on with organizational leadership, you'll also do Organizational Leadership 3050. That's looking at yourself in a broader context, looking at social interactions, looking at community interactions. Third, you do the Organizational Leadership 4000 class. During that course, you're thinking about the idea of how to help yourself become a better adaptive learner, looking at how you can respond to new situations in a positive way, looking at how you can use attention to different schools of thought in a positive way when you have to react to certain situations that you must deal with. Finally, in the capstone, you're going to be thinking about how all of your prior learning relates to your degree program and possibly your prior learning assessment portfolio. Some of you will be doing prior learning assessment portfolios and some of you may not be, and that's totally fine. But part of the idea is that when you look at these theoretical structures for reflective learning, you're going to be taking a look at how that reflective learning that you've done relates to your degree program. So that's what we're doing during these reflective seminars and the capstone. Remember that for the first week of the course, there are certain introductory items that you must make sure that you complete. Make sure that you post your first discussion. This is where you introduce yourself to the rest of the class. When you post in discussion, everyone in the class can see it. When you post your first mail tool to me, you should also include your phone number. This is because sometimes the instructor in an online class will need to contact you and let you know what's going on in the course, or if you haven't logged in a few days, we're going to contact you by phone and say, hi, how are you? Is everything going okay? Do you have any questions? Remember to log in. Then you also have to make sure that you do your first assignment tool introduction, showing that you know how to upload a document within the course. That assignment tool is the one that was the yellow piece of paper with the ruler on the side. There also may be an assessment tool, which is a really quick getting to know you assessment tool with 4 questions, things like what's your hometown and what kind of work experience have you had, just little one-line answer questions, just to prove that you have seen how the assessment tool works. Now, when you begin the first learning module of Organizational Leadership 3000, you're going to start out with a story from an education scholar named David Kolb. And one of the things that you want to do as you look at this story is consider, okay, how is this individual, David Kolb, discussing how he learned something new? The story that he's telling is about a trip to an auto museum. And I don't know if you may be aware of it. If you're really into cars, you may know that there are some auto museums out there that have some really fascinating different examples of cars. For David Kolb, he's describing the first time he went to an auto museum and how surprised he was to learn about all different kinds of cars. And he gives theoretical names to the different phases of his learning process. He talks about the idea of learning by convergence, trying to make his definition of automobiles fit with all the different examples that he saw. And then eventually he ended up transforming his understanding of what an automobile was. He assimilated different kinds of automobiles into his definition of what an automobile was. The key idea here is that learning goes by certain phases, and for a lot of us, when we're confronted with new information, we sort of have to struggle to find a way to make it fit in with what we already know, but then eventually we end up adapting to that new knowledge, and it expands how we look at the world. So that's what you're doing here. You're wanting to think about examples of when you learned in the past, perhaps learning on the job, maybe learning from community service work, and you're going to end up discussing how you went through different phases in your learning process, just like David Kolb does here. As you're looking at this discussion of this museum trip that David Kolb gives us, there's lots of different ways that you can look at it. Just in case you want some concrete examples, I've included some links to information about different types of automobiles and the Auburn Court Duesenberg Museum, which is in Indiana. When you're looking at this idea of how your past experience affects your learning or changes your awareness of the world around you, changes the definitions and the conceptual schemes that you are using to understand the world, that's what David Kolb is really interested in. So, as you get ready for your first discussion assignments and as you get ready for the course and the different activities you're going to have to do for this 1 credit hour seminar, think about the David Kolb story and consider how you're going to be reflecting on your own learning. Think about how you're going to consider the ways in which you've learned before. Think about the different examples of learning that you've gone through in your life, and then plan on how you're going to write those up for the sake of discussions and assignments. Welcome to the class.